You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think.
Do you ever have so many questions and no one to ask, so they're just wasting away on Google searches you'll forget about in an hour or so?
We had that same problem, and that's why we created the RD2BE podcast, a resource for dietetic and nutrition students looking for answers that their peers don't have.
We are students Macy and Emily and registered dietitian Carl Barnes. We engage in conversations and learn from RDs.
Join us weekly as we gain insight into the unique journeys of registered dietitians all over the country.
Welcome back to another week of the RD2BE podcast. I'm your registered dietitian host, Carl Barnes. This is our weekly podcast where we sit down with a different awesome registered dietitian to showcase the diversity of opportunity in the profession and ultimately dismantle the notion that there is a traditional career path. On that note, we're really excited to be sitting down with Gloria Davis Browning. She's a registered dietitian and chef, amongst many other things. So I really appreciate you taking time to sit here with us today and learn more about you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
And I'm Jenna, your RD2BE. And so, Gloria, could you give us a little background into your dietetics journey? Like what made you decide to become an RD and your educational background?
Sure. So right now I'm a culinary dietitian for UCSD dining services, specifically because we have a lot of dietitians on the hospital side and then on campus as well in things like health services and athletics. But dining is pretty unique because so many of our students do eat on campus. And so it's just I feel like it's a perfect meld of, like Carl said, my culinary background and my dietetics background. And then I do have a private practice too, Savor and Soothe, and it's really focused on anti-inflammatory nutrition and gut health. And so that's a side gig. I feel like a lot of dietitians have a private practice of some sort. And then I'm also adjunct faculty at Point Loma Nazarene University. And so all these things, I feel like I'm really able to use all my skills because my dietetics journey started when I was 12 years old. I knew that I wanted to do something with food because I was always in the kitchen. I have a really big family. And so at family gatherings, when we would see everybody, obviously everybody would need to contribute food because there were so many people. And so my food background definitely started when I was really young. But then when I was 12, my mom was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. She had had gestational diabetes twice. And the second time it just kind of stuck around, which we know is common. And so she took me to her dietitian. And honestly, I can't remember if it was a nutritionist or a dietitian, but I think it was a dietitian because I remember the word diet specifically. And she said, "We want to treat you through your diet." And she had food models and posters and colorful facts everywhere, really cool office. And so I was just like, this is amazing. I would love to do this someday. And then this is kind of like a higher level of feeding people, but it's nourishing people. And so that's when I started so I went to culinary school first, and then I took 2 classes there. One was nutrition, and then one was culinary nutrition, which was kind of how to make substitutions for people with food allergies, how to make dishes that are traditional, more healthy and light, like your mac and cheese, what you can use to make it a little bit more nutritious and a little bit less of kind of an impact on the body as far as fat and things like that. And so those 2 classes really inspired me to stay in the culinary field, but have more of kind of a nutritional spin on it. And so I went straight into nutrition after that. I got my bachelor's from Cal State Long Beach. And then I was a restaurant manager while I was getting my master's in nutrition education. And I did that through a distance program. I feel like I'm kind of answering a lot of the other questions that you have.
Oh no, you're hitting all the boxes, and it's absolutely no worries because we're gonna go more in depth with all the things that you're covering, but just doing a blanket like description, that's honestly more the merrier because it's kind of doing a little teaser, as you will, with what we're gonna go into. So yeah, you're perfectly fine.
Perfect. Okay. So I did a distance program through Framingham State University, which is in Massachusetts. And so it was nice because I was able to do that remotely. I got to move around to a couple different places while I was doing that program and see a little bit more of the world outside of California. And so then I was doing the work to kind of get into my dietetic internship. I did become a DTR right out of my bachelor's degree, just to have that credential. And so a lot of it was really, I put a lot of effort towards being a registered dietitian. And just because my journey was a little different, I was a little bit older. I was, I believe, 32 when I was in my internship, and I did not get matched my first 2 rounds. So I was a 3rd round match. And so it was, you know, a little disheartening, but I was just really determined because, you know, having worked in, you know, throughout a lot of my education, my GPA was not the 4.0 that they're looking for, but it was high enough that I felt it was still competitive. So I just really felt like that is what I needed to do and how I could make the most impact. So after I finally got into an internship, that was Iowa State University, once again, distance. I was able to do all my rotations here in San Diego. And I had a couple of jobs as a dietitian before I got to this one at UCSD. But yeah, so that's kind of the long and short of my journey.
Well, I mean, but that's a wonderful, because you honestly laid out so many things that we could just pick from that I think a lot of RD2Bs could get a lot of great information from. And so the first thing that I would want to cover is the distance aspect of your like master's degree and your internship, because given the 2024 changes, a lot of RD2Bs are kind of looking into distance as being an option for their internship to just save money, because having to also get a graduate degree, they're trying, you know, a lot of RD2Bs are wanting to cut costs where they can. And so could you just go a little bit in depth of why you chose the distance program that you did, and what what made you decide to do distance?
Okay, so first of all, it was a lot of flexibility, you know, because like I said, I could just go wherever. And then a lot of times the distance programs are more flexible, obviously, and you getting to pick your rotations, which means you also get to kind of pick your hours. So, you know, a lot of times they recommend not working during your internship. And fortunately, I was able to do that, but some people have to. Some people have to be able to work. And so they work out, you have to be really creative. And we as dietitians, I feel like, we feel that we're very creative and problem solvers. And so I feel like distance internships are a really good way to exercise those skills. The way that I got my distance internship was volunteering. So I literally just cold called everybody. And this was pre-pandemic, so I can't imagine how difficult it is now. And which is why I am also trying to be a preceptor at my current position, because I just really want to pay it forward and make it easier for future dietitians to join us in the field. And so it was really important to me to just get anything, but to get something that was meaningful and that was focused in the world that I wanted to be in. So I was fortunate in that I went after clinical first, because that's usually the hardest one to get. And so I volunteered for a year through this really structured program at Palomar Medical Center in Escondido. And so what they did basically was they picked from their volunteers to offer them internships the following year. And so I had to volunteer for a year. It wasn't just right away like, hey, we can take you on. And so it was a little bit of work, but it was definitely, I feel like I was definitely fortunate in finding an opportunity like that. And then another perk to the distance internship was that I got to, so I was working as a kind of in the administrative sector of school nutrition. And so I worked for a high school district. So there was only 5 schools, but a lot of, high schools are generally bigger. So a lot of students. And so it was really nice to be able to work that closely with it, because it was basically just myself. I was what was my position called? The nutrition technician, I think, something that rhymed. And so I was basically accounts payable, accounts receivable, did all the formatting for menus and things like that. So I checked a lot of boxes because it was just the director, the manager, and myself, and in the nutrition department. And then of course, in the office, because of course we had the leads and the nutrition assistants and the people who actually worked at each of the schools in the kitchens. And so while I was doing that is when I was applying for my internship for the 3rd time. And I decided to go the distance route because I felt like there was a little bit more flexibility, and they tend to, I feel like they're easier to get into because you're doing a lot of the work in setting up the rotations and making your own commitments and things like that. So because of my master's degree, and because I finished my master's degree the year before I did my internship. And so because of my master's degree, my culinary degree, and my work with the school district, I was able to do a lot of what they call PAL, or prior assessed learning. And so I was able to get credit for a lot of those projects and check those boxes in a distance internship. And I feel like, again, they're more flexible. I don't know if you'd be able to do as much of that in a structured program or an in-person internship, or location-based, I think they call it, just because you have a cohort that you need to stick with and everybody's kind of going through the same things, or they have everybody in specific rotations. And so just being an older student, I wanted to keep my unpaid time as short as possible because I already had commitments and, car and paid rent and all that stuff. So if you are an older student, or an older intern or career changer, I would definitely recommend that the distance route, just because I feel like it offers a lot more flexibility. And then it was nice because I got to take a trip to Iowa, and then I never had to go there again because I went in January and it was really cold. So nothing against Iowa, but just not for a California girl.
Yeah, and I'm sure the transition from nice, bright, sunny San Diego to the cold tundra of Iowa was probably a bit of a hit in the face, if you will.
It was very, very flat. So things seemed like they were a lot closer than they actually were. And so a lot of stuff was really spread out, but yeah, it was just so cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what I really loved about distance. And then also you get to meet people from all around, because you still, of course, have assignments and discussion groups and things with your cohort, whether you're doing a master's or internship. And so you get to meet people from all over, and then people are staying where they are or moving around. And so everybody kind of networks for opportunities or just kind of assistance and help, like what you're looking to do. For example, in Iowa, they had a location-based program and a distance program for the internship. And so a lot of the location-based internship had a retail dietitian option, which is not very big in California. And so, but in the Midwest, they have retail dietitians where they literally have an office in the store. And so that was something that was really nice to learn about, because I would love to see that in California and in a more widespread way, because again, they're very select locations that offer that, but a lot of times it's just kind of a corporate dietitian who works for a larger company like Kroger or something, who has all these different grocery chains. And some they have in-store dietitians, and then sometimes they'll just see a sign that says like our dietitian recommends, but it's someone kind of who were working out of the Midwest, and so not location based. But yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like distance, you definitely got a lot of it. You get a more individualized, but also well-rounded experience just from the different people, different locations, and also it's kind of personalized to you. And so you mentioned that you were in school nutrition prior to actually becoming an RD. And so how did you, like, what made you want to go into school nutrition prior to becoming an RD? And like, what kind of made you want to go that route before going to your internship?
So I felt like that was a really great intersection. I actually had a professor at Cal State Long Beach who, because I minored in hospitality management there because I think I had to take 3 more classes or something. They were very closely related, nutrition and hospitality. And so my professor said, oh, school nutrition is great, because I wasn't sure that I wanted to go through the whole thing with becoming an RD just because of my age and because of income and all that sort of thing. I just wanted to kind of get out there and start working and get paid right away. And so he said, well, if you want to skip the RD, you can become a school food service director. And we had a class that, you know, where they had brought in all different types of dietitians and food service professionals. And so they actually had a husband and wife team where one was an administrative dietitian for a school district, and then the other one was a food service director. And so they had gone through the same program, but one had become an RD and become the administrative dietitian for a school district. And then the other one had gone straight into becoming I think he was a manager or assistant director first for a different school district, and then became a director really shortly. And he had some hospital experience, and it was just, like he said, the opportunity just kind of fell into his lap. It was kind of a rare thing, but he had the opportunity to just go right into it as a school food service director. And they do make really good money, but they do have a lot of responsibilities. And so I always said my dream job was to be an assistant food service director. I never wanted to be the actual
Not the
director.
full thing, but yeah.
Right. I'm happy to do the legwork, the behind the scenes, but just I don't want to answer to the USDA directly and have my signature on stuff. So, but that's just me. But and you know, a lot of school districts are too small to have both positions. They just have a director and then like a few managers maybe, and then all the staff in the kitchens. And so the school nutrition appealed to me in that it was, like I said, a combination of nutrition and culinary arts, but it was also just getting students early on the track to nutrition and health and wellness, because they learn how to multiply, they learn how to, they learn how like the earth works and science and how things grow, but they don't really learn a lot about their health and their nutrition and how to eat and their food and why to eat foods and why certain foods are good for you. And that's such a life skill, knowing how to feed yourself, knowing how to source food. And I can tell you that this was a great segue into university nutrition, because honestly, a lot of the freshmen are like kindergartners. Like they've always been fed. People have always made their food for them, or they've just purchased it from somewhere and they're not really sure how to feed themselves. And they're, 18, 19 years old, and no shame on them, but I just feel like it's such a reflection of why school nutrition is so important, because they have a lot of really great programs that they've been implementing lately, as far as, nutrition education in school. They have Harvest of the Month, Dairy Council, I think they're healthyeating.org now. They have free materials that teachers can just order and kind of insert or like weave into their classroom lessons, because they cover writing, math, reading, comprehension, things like that, subjects that they need subject matter to teach anyway, or activities that are nutrition focused and food focused. And So I see progress, but I just feel like, of course, we know the situation with teachers where they're just very overworked and not enough hours in the day, too many kids in the classroom, things like that. So they're not always able to, and then also the curriculum standards where they have to help these kids pass these tests. They have a lot of material to cover outside of nutrition. So a lot of times it's hard to fit it in, or they just don't know where to fit it in.
It's literally and figuratively adding another thing to the plate. So
yeah, exactly.
And actually, what made you so you described how you were educating students and kind of helping them learn the aspects of nutrition, kind of starting them early. And so with your specific job in school nutrition, how exactly what was, I mean, I'm sure every day kind of changed, but what were some common things that you did in school nutrition that allowed you to reach those kids and kind of educate them?
So I had I actually worked for 3 different school districts in different roles. So first I was a lead. So I was directly in the kitchen managing the staff, and it was for an elementary school. So it was a pretty small undertaking, but it was still about 300 students that I was feeding. So I got to talk to them directly and get their feedback and, just help the kindergartners punch in their number. And, we had TK and everything. And so, and kids are very honest. So they'll definitely let you know, like, this looks gross or, whatever. And so you're like, okay, that means we need to work on presentation and all that sort of thing. So it was really great having that feedback and then just asking them what they want to see. And, a lot of times it's chicken nuggets, burgers, hot dogs, things like that, pizza. And so it was difficult connecting to the parents and telling them that they, that we have healthier versions of this. This is not the pizza that you're getting from, pizza night on Fridays from your favorite place. But that it meets all the requirements for whole grains and fat and so on and so forth. I mean, so it was just doing that, and then having control over the lunchroom and being able to decorate it how I wanted, and having information in the decorations. Excuse me. So they were pretty, but also informative and also alluring. So they wanted they wanted to come to the lunchroom. They wanted to eat what was on the posters. And then we were actually feeding them what was there. Because, it's nice to have all these bright fruits and vegetables and things like that, but are you actually serving them? And so we're lucky in California that everything's always in season pretty much. But you still have to think about food cost and things like that. And then when I got into more of a managerial position, I would do harvest of the month. And so coordinate with the teachers, with the classroom tastings for different produce that was seasonal, and connecting them with the local farms. And harvest of the month is great because everything's already done for you. You just need to kind of plug and play. So I was the liaison between the harvest of the month program and the teachers on each of the campuses. And then giving tours of our kitchen so the kids saw where their food came from, and the huge warehouse that we had, which was neat. And then also just control over the menu and doing tastings with the students in person, saying, hey, this is something new that we're putting on the menu. What do you think about it? And, they'd be like, oh, it's too spicy, or, oh, it doesn't taste like what I like. And, oh, what do you like? Oh, Taco Bell, or, whatever.
Yeah.
And then so just saying like, okay, how can we make it more like Taco Bell, but then still within our
Taco Bell, but not Taco Bell. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there was a really cool thing that they did called walking nachos, which was basically just a bag of, like low fat Fritos or whatever with like ground beef and vegetables on top. And I was like, oh, that's such a cute name. And it's cool, and it was, again, people are like, oh, chips and beef or whatever, but it was a good version of it. It made, it met the requirements. So that's all the hate that you get for being in nutrition is you guys serve such gross stuff, or parents are remembering their own school food and they don't realize that it's very different than what they grew up with.
Yeah, but I mean, it kind of shows that like hopefully we're progressing when it comes to school lunch and school nutrition into a better, I mean, kind of better, like, you know, especially in school nutrition, it's great because you have that direct connection to the kids, and it's kind of with working with what you got to make it better, and kind of each generation try and point it towards a bigger and better thing. And with the school nutrition jobs that you held, were those the jobs that you still worked while you were doing your internship?
So just the internship, it was interesting because I was in the administrative position. And so I had the choice because I got my whole food service management rotation covered. And so, which was awesome. And so I got to continue working there and be paid, you know, so I could save up for when I was not going to be paid. Because I had the option to either start my other 2 rotations later or finish early and then, you know, get done early and then get a paying job. So I chose to start late. So basically when everybody else was doing their first rotation, I was still working in the food service management position. And then, yeah, so then the other school food service jobs, one was before I had that job. So I was still in my master's program. And so yes, I was in school, but not in my internship. And then the other one was after I had graduated.
Gotcha.
And become an RD. Yeah.
And did your DTR credential that you got, did that help you get any of the school nutrition jobs, or did it help you in did you see a lot of benefit from getting that DTR with the jobs that you held before your internship or during your internship?
I did. I think, you know, people don't really know what it is. And so it sounds very impressive because it's dietetic technician registered and, you know, the Commission on Dietetic Registration. And, you know, it's like, it looks very official. So even if they don't know what it is, it's like, oh, a nutrition professional that was credentialed. And then actually when I was in my internship, I also got my school nutrition specialist certification.
Oh, awesome.
Which I still keep up because even though it's more focused on K through 12, there's a lot of business management, and it's like the test for food service directors. And so they always want their food service directors to I don't want to say always, but it's a benefit to have your food service director have an SNS, because then they know about audits and food cost and labor and all that sort of thing. And so I think it did help, and I think it did help with my internship as well, because they were like, oh, we basically took like the junior version of the RD exam.
Yeah.
And so you're really well prepared for the RD exam. So I did get into an internship after I took the DTR exam.
Yeah, and I definitely think because the DTR exam is also through the same CDR, you know, that the RD exam is under. Yeah. Dietetic internships, they see, oh, you already took an exam under the exact same registration program that has the RD exam. So it kind of adds that extra oomph into, hey, yeah, I'm capable and I know how to do everything. And it's also great that you also added the SNS while doing and dealing with all the things that you were doing prior to even becoming an RD. And another unique thing about your credentials and like degrees was you had a culinary background. You also had, you know, you got your DPD courses done, but you also got a master's of education, which not a lot of RDs have. And I mean, already describing your background, you already have a super unique upbringing to it, and just unique background into your dietetics journey. And so with that master's of education, what made you decide to go that route? Because if I'm not mistaken, it's a master's of education, like specifically nutrition master's of education. And so what made you decide to go that route for your master's degree?
So I'll say this, I enjoy the science of nutrition, but it just doesn't come as naturally to me. Like, it was very difficult for me to do. I think biochem was the one that I honestly had to take twice because it was just so I mean, I liked microbiology. I liked all the body ones, you know, anatomy and physiology, and microbiology was probably my favorite one, just learning about all the bacteria, and it really helped with food safety. And so I just felt like an education degree, because I always found myself gravitating in my positions toward the trainer role. And then my mother was an educator. My father was a copy editor for a newspaper. So I was just very comfortable with words and teaching, and I love learning things. And so I feel like I'm a lifelong learner, and I always want to pass on things to people. And because again, like I said, I'm very much more comfortable behind the scenes, as Carl can attest to, because I was a speaker at a banquet, and I was just super uncomfortable, but I got through it, and I basically just read it because I had everything written down. And so I feel like I can do it, but it's just not comfortable. So like the education aspect was very much like that, where I was kind of in my element there. And so I was thinking about just getting a regular master's of education. And then I just thought like, okay, well, let me just find any programs that I have that are kind of nutrition adjacent, or I should say like adjacent to a master's in nutrition strictly. And so what I hear a lot of people now are doing is, you know, master's in education, master's in public health, or master's in business. So those are probably the three biggest ones outside of the traditional master's in nutrition that I hear. But yeah, those are the three that I would recommend. And I feel like it's really great to get into. Obviously, the master's of education is great because you can become a professor like I did. You can go on and get your doctorate in education and then get into that administrative level of education, which helps with the nutrition aspect, you know, because then you have more control over how much nutrition is in schools. I mean, obviously you need the right position for it, but it helps you to get into those administrative positions and to be able to get the ear of those who are higher up and to help influence the nutrition presence in school districts. Definitely. And other educational institutions.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like, especially, I haven't heard of a master's of education in nutrition from anyone until I came across you, and I found that super interesting. And so say that someone is interested in like the educational aspect of nutrition, but they say that they have to stay in state, or they don't have any like accessible programs that have a similar version of that master's of education. And so for a student, would you recommend, like, what possible things could they do? Because you did mention school nutrition was a great way to get the education aspect outside of the master's of education, but do you have any other things that you would recommend nutrition students if they were interested in that education aspect or school nutrition, if they couldn't get that degree in master's of education?
Well, if you could just do a general master of education and then do your thesis or whatever your terminal,
the capstone, you know?
Yeah. In like nutrition education.
Gotcha.
And then I know that if you do public health, master's in public health, a lot of it is focused on nutrition education. So sometimes there's a specialization in like community education or health education, and that's very, very close to what we do, because obviously it's nutrition, but it's also, you know, smoking cessation, activity, physical activity, and things like that that help communities overcome these disadvantages that they have.
Awesome. And so with that master's of education, you've already mentioned that it helped you with kind of your background in school nutrition, and it helped you with your current role now. And I kind of want to segue into the business that you also own. And you did mention like a lot of dietitians have private practices or side gigs with the other things that they do. And so with Savor and Soothe, you have a lot of background in culinary and school nutrition. And so what made you decide to have your business focus primarily on gut health and inflammatory? I'm sure your culinary aspect with food could potentially play a role, but could you go more in depth of what made you decide, oh, gut health and inflammation?
Mm-hmm. So I really like the aspect of, as I mentioned before, nourishing and not just feeding, but, making all of our meals purposeful, really looking at what we're putting into our bodies. And so I personally have stage 4 endometriosis. And so it's affected my work life, my fertility, it touches all these areas. And so I know a lot of people, I used to deal with daily pain, and then I had some pretty dramatic surgery. And I thankfully have been relatively pain-free since then. It's been about 7 years now. So, but the management, I wish that I had known, and all of this is so silly because being a nutrition major, you'd think that I would have gotten turned on to anti-inflammatory foods a long time ago, but that's how debilitating it was. I didn't even make that connection because I was just so focused on getting through the day, getting through work, getting through school, being in this horrific chronic pain. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought about my situation, and before my surgery, I kind of got into anti-inflammatory foods a little bit, and I mean, I always used spices and certain things that I knew were good to battle inflammation. But so many of the diseases that we are familiar with, like cancer, diabetes, arthritis, things like that, are inflammation based. And so, but a lot of mental health is also inflammation based. And so it's really important because obviously there are some conditions that just need medication, and that's totally fine. But it's the interventions, kind of similar to my mom's dietitian back in the day. It's kind of like, let's see what food can do to supplement the medication that you may need to take, or just to, if you're not on medication yet, to help your symptoms and see if you can do it, quote unquote, the natural way, and through food and nutrition. And then maybe if that's not working, then add in some medication, because I know that the pharmaceutical industry is a huge, a very hot topic. And
definitely. Mm-hmm.
And so I just come at it from the viewpoint of, if you're already eating every day and you need to eat every day, why not put some emphasis on what you're eating? Mm-hmm. And so that includes, people are like, oh, it's easy for you to say, let's just go to Whole Foods and whatever and get all this like wheatgrass and whatever. But it's like, that's part of what I love about doing through my private practice is just teaching people that it starts in the gut for a lot of different things. And you can change your gut flora to really make an impact on your mental health, eliminate brain fog, or at least reduce it, get more energy, just obviously help with your digestion, and all these things that just kind of have whole body effects. And just even now, because endometriosis is not cured, it's just treated. And so a lot of what was causing my issues was removed, but it's going to come back. It's just a matter of how severely and how long it's going to take. Yeah. And so I really got into the anti-inflammatory foods because I'm trying to keep it at bay for as long as I can. Mm-hmm. And especially on the fertility journey that my husband and I are currently on. And I just want to do what's best, because obviously you don't know what's going on in there. Well, it might not be obvious, but for endometriosis, you have to have some sort of surgery on varying levels to know what's going on. So I just would rather, make it as I feel like as long as I don't have symptoms, then it's going pretty well. So yeah. just helping people find that relief. And what I was going to say before is teaching them, when I was talking about whole foods and things, teaching them how to budget for it, what foods that they can get, what forms of foods they can get, teaching them culinary skills so that stuff isn't so expensive, so they can break it down and, cook in bulk, and just ways to reduce the cost and increase the accessibility of these foods that will make you feel better.
Yeah, because I think with a lot of people, they think, oh, anti-inflammatory, that means that you have to get all these special, like what you said, fancy foods from Whole Foods, go to Trader Joe's every single day for every single meal that I make. But it's great that part of your business model is finding it more accessible ways. Like, oh, you don't have to go to Whole Foods every day to have anti-inflammatory foods. You don't have to, buy the most expensive meal items to still put good effort and like nutritious foods into your diet. And yeah, that's just a really great business model, and the personal attachment you have to it as well. And so one thing that I thought of when you were like talking through all that was there any personal mantras or motivations that kind of kept you going through that struggle? Because you said that you struggled with it with endometriosis for you still do, with the pain and everything, and even with your current journeys that you're going through with it now. Do you have any personal mantras or things that just keep you motivated when you go through those difficult times? Or like what you mentioned with the current inflammation is at bay, like, just not knowing when it can flare up, and the best thing you can do is just work with what you have in the moment. So do you have any mantras? I think that's the best word to use for it, but kind of like mantras that kind of help you get through those harder times.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, but I had a few that I would kind of go through. But so one is kind of a visualization that I would do, and then the other one is a quote from Winnie the Pooh. So I'll do the Winnie the Pooh quote first. But it's because Winnie the Pooh was very big in my household when I was growing up, and so it's very near and dear to my heart. And there was a movie where Christopher Robin says to Pooh, he says, "You're braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think." And so that always, anytime I'm having a difficult time, whether I'm suffering through something that I can't control, or, something that I can control, and just kind of figuring out how that can be done, or just to gain strength, I would repeat that to myself, and then it would make me feel better, like, okay, I can make it through. And then another thing I heard, which was kind of in line with that, is like, you can do anything for a minute at a time.
Yeah.
And so just kind of taking each minute by each minute, and, being mindful. So mindfulness obviously is very big in our profession with mindful eating, and just in general to help with stress too. Because they say depression is thinking about the past, anxiety is thinking about the future, and mindfulness is thinking about now. And I know I'm just like churning out all the quotes and stuff, but these are all helpful to me.
Hey, yeah, and like someone's definitely going to take good stuff from it all. So I say keep it coming.
Yeah. And then the visualization I would have, because a lot of the gut stuff and stress, gut stuff and hormone stuff are tied to stress. And so I'd like to say I'd been anxious my whole life, but as long as I can remember. But I think we all have some sort of anxiety, whether it's a daily thing or situational. And so I think of the Green Mile, and I don't remember his name, but was it like Big John or something? I don't know, the prisoner who would like breathe out the flies, when he would like take on other people's illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And so it probably sounds really weird if people haven't seen this movie, but he would like touch someone who had some sort of sickness, and he would kind of pull it out of them. and then he would breathe out all these little like fly or gnat looking things, and then they would be healed. And so I think about my stress as kind of those flies buzzing around, and the things that obviously, like, who wants flies in their body? And so just kind of taking a deep breath and then exhaling, and then just imagining those flies coming out, and then I feel less stressed. It's amazing. And I mean, a lot of that is just breath work, but I feel like the visualization helps a lot too, to just be like, this stress is harmful to me, it's detrimental, it's feeding my endometriosis, so I'm just going to breathe it out. And then sometimes it takes a couple breaths, but
absolutely. And I think actually attaching a purpose to the breath, like, oh, I'd never imagined I'd say the sentence, oh, I'm breathing out flies. That kind of, I think, especially with RD2Bs and like registered dietitians, we're very much purpose driven. Like, we're doing everything for a purpose. And even when it comes to self-care, if someone just says, oh, just take deep breaths, it's like, that doesn't sound super fun. Like, like, why am I taking deep breaths? But even something so like almost humorous of, oh, it's to breathe out the flies and gnats. I feel like with some students and registered dietitians in our field, it's like, oh, okay, now I'll do it. And so I think that's a really great thing to take away from that. And so with those motivations and mantras and those quotes, did any of those things influence you or also motivate you to get involved with California's Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics? Because if I'm not mistaken, one of your current roles is being the chapter president.
Yes, I did forget to mention that, but so there, part of it was initially networking, because I've always been, I think since I was a student, I was part of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And then, of course, with that, you automatically become affiliated with your state chapter. So I've been a part of the Academy and the California Academy for a long time. And I joined San Diego district when I moved back after school. And so at first it was for networking, because I was in my internship at that time. And then it was, and I'm just not a good natural networker, because I mean, if you haven't gotten the sense already, I'm kind of an introvert. So I just, it's draining to go out and meet people and things like that. So I was like, oh, this is something I can handle, having these events every now and then with people who want to talk about nothing but nutrition and health, and, or I should say mainly, not nothing but, who just have common interests. And that's really what we're all looking for in networking and in friends and things like that. So just being older and then having leadership experience already, I automatically gravitated toward the leadership roles. So I got on the board, I started out on the education committee, and then I became the secretary, and then the president-elect last year, and then now the president. So once I became a dietitian, it became more about giving back. And so I mentioned before that I always want to give the help that I wish I had or that I was given, and just put that back out into the community and into the profession. And it's really exciting when people are excited about the things that you're doing. Like, I know that gut health is very much on the horizon, and there's nutritional psychology is coming out into the open, which I think might be my next move eventually in a few years. Just specializing in that, like the connection between the gut and the brain, the gut-brain axis, and just really going more into that, whether that's research or education, I don't know. But just also because, the more people are interested in it, the more it becomes like actual degrees and actual professions that you can get into. And so in addition to now being in charge of the different events we can hold, who we network with, what organizations we partner with for this year, and the types of events we put on, like educational events and things like that. It's just so nice to be able to see all these people with different interests, clinical and community and food service and other, exercise science and all these different things, and how they're all so interrelated, and they feel so separate at times, but they're all really, we all obviously have the common goal, but then I just feel like new specializations are born from these connections of like, oh, what if I was a personal trainer and a dietitian? And then, you go on from there. And it's really nice to see yourself kind of emerging as a leader, because I never thought that I would be, a guest speaker at an event, or anything like that. But it's nice to know that people are listening to you and that you do have influence and you do make a difference. And it also makes you accountable to stand behind what you're saying, to have everything, backed by research and things like that. And so it's just contributed a lot to my professional and personal life in a lot of ways. And I just really enjoy the mentorship aspect of it. And just being able to answer questions and to do things like this, just, be a resource for people who are wanting to go into the field, and especially ones that are having a hard time. Because I know that my path was not easy. I don't think anybody's path is like to nutrition, whether it's the classes are hard or you're struggling paycheck to paycheck. There are different degrees of difficulty, but I feel like the more you go through, the better equipped you are to help people who are in your same situation.
Yeah, and it's also just knowing that you're not alone in those situations. Like, even just like, for example, someone listening to this podcast and hearing your story, they might relate to almost everything or even one of those things, but it's just adding that motivation and bump of, hey, I'm not alone. And one really good thing that you mentioned was being an introvert, but also pursuing these leadership positions. And so my one last question I'd want to ask is, for those introverts out there, or just for those RD2Bs that are a little kind of hesitant or intimidated by pursuing those leadership roles that they know will help boost their DICAS application or their resume, or just wanting to put themselves out there, was there any advice or things that you wish you knew before pursuing the leadership positions that you did that kind of helped you overcome any worries or anxieties that you had?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I always did best when I stayed true to myself and when I found my strengths. And because, like I said, I didn't want to admit that I was a nutrition major and that I struggled a little bit with science, because I was like, that's such a big part of it. And I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it, but I just had to study so much harder. And, like hair flip, I wasn't used to studying very hard, like in high school and stuff, but, or having to study hard, because I'm a great test taker and, excuse me, and things like that. So I just, some people are really great at the math and science, and then they struggle with writing, and it must feel so silly, just similar to the way that I was embarrassed about science not coming that easily to me. Struggling to write is probably shameful for some people, but just recognize that, own it, and then get a tutor or get someone to help you edit, or writing assistance. Just don't be afraid to ask for help. That was my huge thing, because I was so proud, and I was always told like, oh, you're so smart, like you're in GATE, you're in like these advanced classes in high school and whatever. And then I feel like college is always kind of a slap in the face, but then it's just like it's a different environment. And so you learn your real life strengths and weaknesses, or I don't call them weaknesses, I call them opportunities. But it's just really important to follow your gut, no pun intended, but I mean, there's a lot there, but just like follow, if you're feeling uncomfortable in something, or if you're struggling in a class, just listen to that and own it and ask for help. And don't be afraid to admit, because I can tell you that you can be a dietitian and not be that like type A 4.0, like 4.2, 4.5 dietitian with this sparkling resume and all this volunteer, there are dietitians out there like that, and that's amazing and that's great. But if you're not that dietitian, you don't have to be. You can be the type of dietitian that you're going to be and still make a difference in the world. And that's what I learned, because I was striving for that perfect, like what I thought a dietitian should be. And I just really didn't feel like I fit in. I wanted to give up a lot of times. Like I said, initially when I was going through school, I saw the people around me and I was like, I don't even want to be a dietitian because I feel like I would be so uncomfortable. But then I found out that there were other ways to do it than like the traditional path. And also being, I'm very big on diversifying dietetics, whether it's being a male or being a person of color, like we need that representation. And so that honestly scared me because I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me or who had my similar background. And I was just like, even if I do make it, I'm not going to have any support. And so I think it's important for RDs to be who are in my case, like of color or come from a struggling background or things like that. That I shouldn't say struggling background, that sounds terrible, but who might not have had the easiest path.
It wasn't a streamline. Mm-hmm.
Right. That they can see me and say like, oh, okay, it is possible. And I did see a couple of role models, even if they weren't dietitians per se, they were professors or they were directors or managers. And I was like, oh, okay, you can be a nutrition professional and look like me. And if you don't see anybody like you, then you're a pioneer, so it's great.
And and that's honestly just everything that you just said is like the highlight of what RD2BE and what we want to do for nutrition students is, and like weakness to opportunity and just owning all of it and like embracing all of it. And so thank you so much for being here with us today and just sharing all of your great nuggets of knowledge. And I know that RD2BEs and nutrition students out there are going to learn a lot from this episode. So thank you so much for being here, Gloria, and it was awesome.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.